Hello, everyone. Grimdark Metaphysics. Is there an ultimate reality in Warhammer 40K? It depends on whom you ask, but most people will know neither what Grimdark nor what metaphysics means. So allow me to explain briefly. Grimdark, of course, you all know, is a portmanteau stemming from the Warhammer 40K motto, "In the grim darkness of the far future, there's only war." The setting is grim, in that there are no properly good factions, where good equals something like mainly trying to preserve the dignity, the liberty and life of conscious beings. It's also grim as most factions, as for most factions, life is not very good in most senses of the term. And hope is mostly absurd. It's also dark for similar reasons. As the emperor himself says to Diocletian, quoting the poet Dylan Thomas, who might actually have been a guise of the emperor, who knows, quote, "The shining path is lost to us. Now we rage against the dying of the light." So that's pretty dark. There are epistemic senses of darkness in play as well. On one hand, ignorance abounds. I mean, what with the aversion against science and history and all that. But on the other, the universe itself appears to be resisting any attempts at understanding it fully. Still, people, humans and non-humans alike, do have views about the world that they inhabit. They express worldviews, and then they, kill each other over them. So metaphysics, that's why it's grimdark. Metaphysics can also mean a lot of things, but I refer to the branch of philosophy concerned with questions about reality and being. So, what it means to be real, what being is, what kinds of being there are, and what the most fundamental kinds of things are. More drastically, it's about what the absolute or ultimate reality is, what principles we need to posit, what everything basically is. Now, worldviews incorporate metaphysical positions, albeit without acknowledging it, since every worldview, be it religious or materialistic or spiritual or scientific or whatever, includes at least implicit answers to metaphysical questions. So if you are religious, you will probably assume that God is the ultimate reality, and that the world was created, for example. If you are a materialist, you will, as the name suggests, assume that matter is the ultimate reality, and so forth. And explicating these latent metaphysical assumptions results in Christian metaphysics, materialist metaphysics, idealist metaphysics, whatever. And if you think this is all bullshit, and metaphysics doesn't have a proper subject, you're a metaphysical nihilist, which is also okay, a venerable philosophical stance, but in need of detailed defense as well. Now, metaphysics as a discipline can be seen as the explicit and systematic study and development of arguments regarding these matters. So most worldviews will turn out to be way too crude, metaphysically speaking. They might fail for being dogmatic, or for being inconsistent, or for not being able to conceptualize what they should be conceptualizing, or they might sound like they express an actual metaphysical positions without doing so. Take everything as relative. It certainly sounds like a statement on the fundamental nature of everything. But everything is a quantifier. So everything what? Everything that exists, presumably, but relative in what regard to what or whom. The term relative only makes sense if it's used to refer to a specific relation. I might be relatively tall in comparison to a squat, but relatively small in comparison to a space marine. So being tall, being small are relations, which can be relative. So everything in existence is relative in what regard to what. Unless we specify these things, we're not actually saying anything. It sounds like we're saying something, but everything is relative. It's not a thesis. It's not a proposition. Now we can fight over like the metaphysics of our own reality, and we've been doing that for a while now. But we can also fight about the metaphysics of fictional worlds, especially the Warhammer universe. More precisely, we can take a look at the metaphysical commitments we find within the universe and try to gauge how accurate they are in relation to the ultimate fictional reality, hence Grimdark Metaphysics. Now, what are the options in that regard? Well, there are several options, some being dualist, so accepting two basic irreducible levels or types of reality. Some are monist, so working with one principle, although very different kinds on offer. Some propose more realms, like Frege, where you get 3 levels, but you get the idea. Dualism in our world might concern being and becoming, for example, as it does in Plato. So minifigures are in the realm of becoming. They get created, they become, and then you paint them, and they might get destroyed, they may break, they are subject to change. Ideal entities like numbers, for example, are not. So the number of your minifigures might change, but the number itself won't change. Numbers belong to the realm of being, so it's being and becoming. That's a form of dualism. Today, a dualism is usually about matter and mind, where neither can be reduced to the other. Matter, whatever that might be, I'm sure physicists will tell us at some point, and mind, whatever that might be, someone else might tell us at some point, are fundamental kinds of being, irreducible to each other if you're a dualist. So usually one is a dualist or a monist in regard to something. And I can also, combine the things. I can be a dualist about being and becoming, but a monist about mind, so it depends. You can combine the isms, that's what I'm saying. Monism, of course, means that you believe that everything can be reduced to one kind of thing, or even one thing. If you're Parmenidean, you just think being is the one thing that exists. Or, mind might be reducible to matter, or matter to mind, or whatever. Doesn't really matter at this structural stage of looking at things. Doesn't have to be stuff that you reduce other stuff to. You can think that process ontology is true, which means that the basic fundamental reality is not one of things or matter or mind, but of process. Right, okay, now on to Warhammer. We can find several dualist worldviews in Warhammer, of course. I think the basic ones in the Imperium and the Eldar are dualist. They concern the materium-immaterium divide. So the material is not made of the immaterial and vice versa, although they both obviously influence the other, either by providing the biological foundation for consciousness that the warp and the immaterium needs, or by incursion, warpcraft, and faith. So you get 2 realms, basically, in Imperial and Eldar metaphysics or worldviews, although the relationship is not quite clear, even to them. Concerning our own background knowledge of what's going on, the immaterium appears as an additional dimension drawing its determination from the emotions of living, be-souled beings. So, and the soul being, like in Plato, kind of amphibious in between. And in fact, most life seems to depend on both dimensions. So the Farseer, the Elder Farseer and Natasei, for example, characterize the extreme fate of reality at the hands of either the Chaos Traitors or the Necrons as and I quote, endless chaos or lifeless eternity. So, the Elder appear to think that you need both. And they seem to have existed all the time, with the immaterium having become warped at some point, for some reason. And that seems to be kind of the default metaphysics of fans and writers as well. Without a big third major option, you have the material and the immaterial. To illustrate some of the other possibilities, I want to mention a form of dualism which works differently. Although Fabius Bile posits that ontology bores me, that's a quote, he engages in an interesting bit of speculation with Cole, which is dualist in nature, but different to the standard view. I quote, "There are no gods, Archmagus. There's only time and being and thinking things that brew themselves up out of the two." So that's a dualism, time and being, that cuts reality a little differently into being and time rather than materium and immaterium. As for monisms, both the earlier Tao worldview, for example, as well as the imperial truth, so the pre-heretical imperial worldview, appear to be monist, namely materialist. You know, everything is matter, or naturalism. I mean, they're both wrong, but for very different reasons. One is honest ignorance, the other is very, very dishonest subterfuge. I quote another potential heretic, Cypher. In the days of imperial truth, anything immaterial was considered as, quote, just entities and properties of reality that we did not understand. Now that seems naive. Demons are real. Incidentally, Cypher also offers a description of the warp, which might point towards a unified image of reality when he says of the immaterium, quote, "It is a dimension not of matter, but of thought and psychic energy." So energy could be the monist basis of reality as well. The cult mechanicus motive force, for example, might be along the same lines. So there could be an energy monism. Now, we have other kinds of monism, I think. The Necrons might count as monists. It really depends. They do acknowledge, I mean, both the Necrons and the Orcs acknowledge the existence of the warp, but they might not take it to be fundamental. I mean, the Necrons have to admit that the Immaterium exists because, you know, they got, the old ones relied on it so heavily and quite effectively to begin with. So, you know, Necrons had the experience with the warp, so they have to acknowledge it. But in talking to Gilliman, Hapthara, servant of the Silent King, calls the Chaos Gods non-entities. So, you know, to which the humans fall prey. So he acknowledges the existence and potency of the warp while also denying it a substantial nature. So that could be a materialism with accepting that there is something else as well without it being fundamental. Would have to discuss this with Trazyn or Orican. I think they'd be quite happy to get into a bit of philosophizing. Unlike most orcs, which probably don't like to indulge in regular bouts of philosophy, which might be, you know, a strength and a blessing, but they certainly do have a worldview which is metaphysically interesting, as well as a very unique position regarding the metaphysics of Warhammer 40K itself. Of course, we all know the belief about the colors and stuff. You know, purple makes you invisible, or, you know, have you ever seen a purple orc? That kind of thing. And the psychic gestalt field that they project makes these kinds of belief effective. And the ethico-onto-epistemological model, which will be adequate to this form of existence, will be some form of, you know, radical constructivism, or, you know, with a K, radical constructivism, which means that the idea is in play that reality is not passively taken up in perception and thought, but constructed. There's no objective reality and no objective morality as a subset of what is real. Might makes right and belief shapes existence. That's basic metaphysical stance here, which is funnily combined with a complete lack of any form of skepticism. Usually that form of relativism leads to skepticism fairly quickly, but the orcs never doubt or reflect, leading to the charming existence of Gork and Morg in the warp as well. So, but the metaphysical upshot is that for orcs, presumably neither the material nor the immaterial is that fundamental. belief, power, or will must be considered as fundamental. We'd have to consult some of the odd boys on this, I guess. So the topic of will and power leads me to another option, which is a monist approach. Nietzsche developed his will to power, which the orcs kind of embody, from Schopenhauer's will to live, which is, you know, another form of expression of the will itself. If you want to put it very, very briefly, Schopenhauer posits the will as distinct from all representation. So we represent the world, it appears and its objects in time and space. We see everything as connected through laws and rules according to a principle of reason. But the ground of this play, or manifold of experience, is will, as a take on Kantian metaphysics. So the will is the thing in itself. And in Warhammer, we do find a few individuals who highlight the role of will. Bile again. Flesh was nothing, will was all. And later, will call, it is what will save that, as it's will that will save us, not stories. So yeah, Bile might be a Schopenhauerian. A few spoilers, a few major spoilers from Godblight will follow. So if you want to read it without being spoiled, just close your ears. Because at the end of the novel, Guilliman lets himself be defeated by Mortarion and lets himself be drawn into the Garden of Nurgle. And upon arrival, the Primarch is then resurrected miraculously, then offers Mortarion a glimpse of hope of redemption, which is cool, and continues then to quite spectacularly burn a substantial patch of the garden, even rocking the Nurgle's mounds. And then he speaks for the Emperor, maybe even in the Emperor's voice, stating, "This realm is not real, only will is real, and none may outmatch my will." So this appropriately epic, metaphysically monist proposition is a twist, I think, on the Schopenhauerian approach, since will is assumed as ultimate reality, but seen as manifold. So it's not just one will. Only will is real, but there are several wills which contend, apparently, differing in degrees of strength. So in some sense, the Emperor is a monist in both metaphysical and moral matters. Only will is real, and only his will counts. So to conclude, I don't really want to stipulate the correct in-game metaphysics. I don't want to tell any of the factions whether they're right or wrong. Presumably most races get something right, including those who don't engage in philosophy, like the orcs and, of course, the Tyranids. Maybe the Tyranids don't even have a worldview. We don't know. They won't tell. And, you know, materium and immaterium do exist within that universe. I just want to point out a feature of two of the discussed dimensions, because both the warp and will are metafictional. And are certainly good options for elements of the real-world ontology of these fictions, such as Warhammer itself. What do I mean by that? Why are they metafictional options? Because fiction, any fiction, depends on our imagination as well as our intention. We have to dream it up, or we have to will it into existence. And then in that sense, of course, determinism is true for any fictional universe. Its fate is determined by its authors or the players, you know, even through stochastic means and dice, but it's still determined from the outside by its readers or players. So fictional worlds are woven or warped according to our will and to our imagination, both conscious as well as unconscious, which we've been talking about. So this is arguably the reason why we're interested in these worlds in the first place, because they're products of the human spirit, the human mind. We are beings who produce fictions, unlike presumably most other animals. And in and through those fictions, we express and mirror ourselves. So understanding these fictions might therefore help us understand ourselves a little better. Incidentally, the speculative philosopher Canton Meillassoux proposes that our own reality is fundamentally chaotic. I quote, "Our absolute, in effect, is nothing other than an extreme form of chaos, a hyper-chaos, for which nothing is or would seem to be impossible, not even the unthinkable. Far from guaranteeing order, it guarantees only the possible destruction of every order." So we find heresies even in our current metaphysical debates about the real world. Erebus would be very proud. Thank you.